The gardener's secret. The morning mist curled around the rose bushes as Gia knelt in the dirt, her fingers tracing the delicate veins of a wilting leaf. At 26, she had spent half her life learning the language of plants, the way they bent toward light, the subtle changes in their stems when they thirsted. The Verma estate's gardens were her sanctuary, though Mrs. Verma saw her as nothing more than hired hands. "Those roses better be perfect for the luncheon tomorrow," Mrs. Verma called from the veranda, her voice sharp. "And the orchids look pathetic. Fix them." Gia bit her tongue. Orchids didn't bloom on command, but explaining that to Mrs. Verma was like whispering to stone. "I'll do my best, ma'am," she murmured, though the woman had already turned. Away the estate was a sprawling monument to wealth, all marble and manicured hedges. Gia had worked there for 5 years, sending most of her earnings to her ailing father in the village. Her dream was simpler, small nursery of her own, where she could grow the hybrids she sketched in her secret notebook. "She'll never appreciate you," Rajat said, appearing beside her with a cup of chai. The chauffeur had been her only friend at the estate, but the plants do. Gia smiled, accepting the warm cup. Plants don't care about social status. Speaking of status, Rajat lowered his voice. "Mrs. Verma's nephew is arriving today. Arav Singh. Studied plants in Europe." Gia's pulse quickened. "Botany. Don't get excited. Rich boys play at science until they inherit their fortunes." But when Arav stepped out of the car that evening, Gia hidden among the jasmine vine saw the way his fingers brushed the petals of her sunrise hibiscus, his eyes widening in recognition. "Aunt Nandini," he greeted Mrs. Verma, but his gaze kept drifting to the garden. "These specimens are extraordinary. Your gardener must be brilliant." Mrs. Verma's lips thinned. "He's adequate. Nothing special, just grip on the vines." Tightened that night, in her tiny cottage at the edge of the estate, her father waited with a chessboard. "Bad day?" he asked, reading her face. "The usual," she moved a pawn. "But something's different." Her father's knowing smile reminded her of her mother. "Change comes like seasons, Beta. Sometimes as softly as a petal falling." As Gia sketched a new hybrid in her notebook, she wondered if Arav Singh was the wind that would uproot her, the rain that helped her grow. The greenhouse was quiet in the pre-dawn light, the glass panes still beaded with dew. Gia slipped inside, her bare feet silent on the worn stone floor. This was her favorite time when the estate slept, and the plants seemed to whisper only. To her, she knelt beside her secret project, a row of delicate vines with flowers that shimmered like crushed sapphires, a cross between a rare Himalayan creeper and a tropical moonflower. She had no name for it yet, only the thrill of watching something impossible take root. "You're up early," the voice sent her heart leaping into her throat. A shadow moved between the ferns, resolving into Arov's lean frame. He wore a rumpled linen shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his dark hair mussed from sleep. "Mr. Singh," she breathed, hastily covering her seedlings with a cloth. I didn't expect anyone here at this hour." He crouched beside her, his knee brushing hers. "Neither did I, but I saw the light." A fingers hovered over the cloth. "May I?" She hesitated, then pulled the fabric away. His sharp inhale was all the validation she needed. "Gia, this is extraordinary." His fingertips traced a velvet soft petal. "The pigmentation, it's unlike anything I've seen in nature." "It shouldn't exist," she admitted. "The parent species aren't even from the same continent." Arav's grin was sudden, brilliant. "That's what makes it genius." She flushed under his praise. No one had ever called her work genius before. By breakfast, the household buzzed with whispers. The nephew spent hours in the greenhouse with the gardener girl. Mrs. Verma's lips pursed tighter with each rumor. "You'll serve at dinner tonight," she informed Gia, not looking up from her correspondence. "We're the blue sari. And for heaven's sake, wash your hair." I clenched her fists. "I'm not a servant. I'm a botanist." But the words stayed locked behind her teeth. The dining hall glittered with crystal and candlelight. Gia stood stiffly by the wall, balancing a tray of spiced lamb, her borrowed sari itching at her collarbone. "Hybridization potential is staggering," Araf was saying to Mr. Kana, a wealthy investor. Gia's work could revolutionize ornamental horticulture. Mrs. Verma's knife screeched against her plate. Arav, darling, must we discuss gardening at dinner? But it's not just gardening, Aunt. Arav's gaze found Gia's. It's science, art. The room stilled. Mr. Kana dabbed his mouth with a napkin. If these hybrids are as unique as you say, young man, I'd like to see them. Mrs. Verma's smile was glacial. Of course, Gia. We'll give you a tour tomorrow. Gia's stomach dropped. She's setting me up to fail. Midnight found her pacing her cottage floor. A knock startled her. Araf stood in the doorway, moonlight silvering his shoulders. Her breath caught as he unfolded a leather-bound journal, a creamy paper, the spine embossed with her name. For your research, he said softly. Proper documentation matters if you want to patent your work. She ran her fingers over the engraving. Gameta. No one had ever called her that before. You're risking your aunt's wrath for me, she whispered. He stepped closer. His thumb brushed a smudge of soil from her wrist. Some things are worth the risk. The air between them, MED. Then footsteps on the gravel path. They sprang apart just as Rajat rounded the corner, lantern raised. Gia, Mrs. Verma's looking. Foro, his eyes darted between them. Tell her you're asleep. When he vanished, Aro exhaled shakily. Tomorrow. Meet me at the greenhouse before dawn. She nodded, her pulse a wild blooming thing in her throat. The morning of the garden party dawned with a sky so clear it looked polished. Gia stood at the edge of her experimental plot, fists clenched at her sides. Today her work would be seen for the first time. Arav appeared beside her, his crisp white shirt rolled to the elbows. Ready? She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. By noon, the estate teemed with guest women in pastel saris, men in tailored suits. All murmuring approval at the manicured hedges and rose arbors, Mrs. Verma glided among them basking in their praise. And this, she announced, sweeping a hand toward Gia's hidden garden, is our little project. The crowd oohed at the sapphire vines, the golden orchids Gia had coaxed from stubborn soil. Professor Aya, stooped man with eyes like a hawk's, stepped forward. Remarkable, he said, bending to inspect a bioluminescent fern. Who's the breeder? Mrs. Verma's smile tightened. Our staff follows my designs, of course. Gia's. Nails bit into her palms. Arav cleared his throat. Actually, Professor Gia created these hybrids independently. Her notes on cross-pollination are groundbreaking. The crowd stilled. Mrs. Verma's rouge stood out like two angry petals against her pallor. Professor Iyer turned to Gia. Is this true? All eyes locked onto her. Her pulse roared in her ears. Yes, she said. The word hung in the air, small, defiant. Mrs. Verma moved like a storm front. You forget yourself, girl, she hissed. Everything here belongs to me. Gia's voice shook, but it didn't break. The plants obey the laws of nature, ma'am. It's not estate ledgers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aro stepped between them. Professor, perhaps you'd like to discuss Gia's research over tea. Mrs. Verma's glare could have wilted roses. By evening, the guests had left, but the estate thrummed with tension. Gia scrubbed potting soil from her nails, waiting for the axe to fall. It came as a slammed door. Mrs. Verma stormed into the greenhouse, her silk sari hissing against the tiles. You humiliated me. Gia set down her trowel. I told the truth. You stole. The woman's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Pack your things. You're done here. Arav appeared in the doorway. No, she's not. His aunt whirled. This doesn't concern you. It does. He held up a yellow document. Grandfather's will designates the greenhouse as a research space. This work belongs to the researcher Gia. Mrs. Verma's face went. Slack. You'd choose a servant over family. Arav didn't blink. I'm choosing science over greed. The silence that followed was thicker than monsoon air. Later, under a sky smeared with stars, Gia pressed her forehead to the greenhouse. Glass. She'll never forgive you. Arav's shoulder brushed hers. I don't care. When she turned, his face was inches away, close enough to see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. Closer still when he cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her lip. The first kiss tasted like earth and defiance. The letter arrived at dawn. Jiya stared at the embossed Verma estate seal, her stomach twisting. Inside a single sentence, "The Northwest greenhouse will be demolished next Monday." Her hands trembled.
Ow!
That greenhouse held 5 years of her work seedlings. Hybrids, the very vines that had charmed Professor Eyre. Era found her kneeling in the dirt, frantically transplanting specimens into clay pots. "She can't do this," he said, reading the fury in her stiff shoulders. "She owns the land." Jiya didn't look up. A bead of sweat traced the line of her neck. "I should have known better than to." His hand closed over hers, stilling it. "We'll take them to the old Singh nursery." Her head snapped up. "The derelict one by the river." "It's mine. Grandfather left it to me." His thumb brushed her knuckles, streaked with soil. "We'll rebuild there." The we hung between them, heavy with promise. Mrs. Verma's retaliation came swift and surgical. By noon, the household staff avoided Jiya like she carried blight. The head cook forgot her meals. The laundress lost her uniforms. Only Rajat remained, slipping her a tiffin box under the banyan tree. "She's cutting your roots," he muttered. "Be ready." Jiya chewed her lip. "Arav's arranging investors. Professor Eyre wants to fund my research."
Ads.
Laugh was sharp. "You think money matters to her? She'd burn every rupee to keep you in the dirt." That night, the greenhouse door creaked open without warning. Jiya whirled, expecting Mrs. Verma's cold smile. Instead, Arav looked wrecked. His collar was undone, his hair finger-combed in agitation. "She's disinheriting me." Words landed like a stone. Jiya reached for him instinctively. His hands were ice, because of me. Because I refused to back down. He pulled her close, his breath warm against her temple. Worth it. The kiss was different this time. Desperate. Clinging, his fingers tangled in her work-rough hair. Her palms mapped the planes of his back through thin cotton. When his teeth grazed her bottom lip, she gasped a crash outside. They broke apart just as a shadow fled past the windows. Rayat's voice, tight with warning. "She knows." At daybreak, the estate was eerily quiet. Jiya loaded the last wagon of plants, her spine prickling with unseen eyes. Mrs. Verma appeared on the veranda, sipping chai like a queen surveying a rebellion. "Running away, Miss Botanist?" Gah straightened, moving up. Gah. The older woman's cup clattered against its saucer. "You'll fail. People like you always do." Arav stepped into the sunlight, his suitcase in hand. "Good thing she's not alone." For the first time, Mrs. Verma looked uncertain. Jiya took Arav's outstretched hand. Together, they walked away from Verma Estate Award, a nursery, a future, a war still blooming. The Singh nursery had been abandoned for a decade. Vines choked the walls. The glass panes were webbed with cracks. But when Jiya pushed open the rusted gate, she didn't see ruin, she saw potential. Arav set down his suitcase with a thud. Home rebuilding was brutal. They worked until their hands blistered, scrubbing mold from tables, patching roofs with tarpaulin. By day, Jiya nursed her rescued plants back to health. By night, Arav bent over ledgers, securing grants with Professor Eyre's connections. One evening, as monsoon rain drummed the glass, Jiya found him asleep at his desk, ink smudged on his cheek. She traced the stain with her thumb his hand. Caught her wrist stealing secrets, Meta. "Just admiring the view," she murmured. The kiss that followed was slow, sweet, until his teeth tugged her lower lip, and she gasped into his mouth. The desk creaked as he lifted her onto it, papers fluttering to the floor. "Wait," she breathed, pulling back. What if this ruins everything?" His laugh was warm against her. "Throat, Jiya. We're literally in a greenhouse. Ruin is how we grow." Mrs. Verma struck in September. Jiya awoke to shattered glass. Her hybrids, her babies lay uprooted, stems snapped like bones. The word THIEF smeared in red across. The table's Arov's roar of fury shook the rafters. I'll burn her estate to the ground. Gia caught his arm. No, her voice was steel. We fight with sunlight. The Botanical Marvels exhibit opened on Diwali. Crowds pressed against the ropes, marveling at Gia's midnight orchids that glowed like embers, her drought-defying roses. Professor. Our beamed beside reporters. Then you. Mrs. Verma stood in the entrance, her silk sari outshining the exhibits. You think parlor tricks make you equal? Gia stepped forward. I think science doesn't care about surnames. She gestured to a humble pot. This is for you. The crowd gasped. A Verma rose, her signature flower butt with petals the exact shade of Gia's old work. Sorry, Mrs. Verma recoiled. Is this a joke? It's an offering. Gia held her gaze. You taught me survival. That's worth honoring. The older woman stared at the bloom, her rigid posture wavering. Then she turned on her heel and left. At midnight, Gia found Arav on their nursery's roof, fireworks bursting above the city. Regrets? She asked. He pulled her into his lap, his lips finding the freckle behind her ear that made her shiver. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. Below them, their first batch of seedlings stretched toward the moonwild, improbable, alive.